Well, hello everyone. Welcome to World at War Comics. My next guest is Mr. Joe Kelly, creator, writer of comics, man in action, TV, film. Joe, you kind of do it all, and the career that you have, man, you've accomplished quite a bit from Emmy-winning TV to amazing comics like Deadpool, where you kind of set the standard, I think, as a fan for who Deadpool is today. Of course, Spider-Man, your run on Action Comics was incredible. Anyways, thanks for joining me. It's
Thank
such an
you.
honor to have you.
I appreciate it. It's hard to I don't always take compliments well, so thank you. I get shut down. I get too embarrassed. No, I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, it's so cool to be able to speak to you. I thought maybe we could break it up in two. I would love to talk about Man of Action Studios and all the things that you've accomplished with the team there,
Mhm.
because there's been some pretty amazing stuff that has happened. So maybe we could kind of talk about how that all came about. Joe, is that okay?
Yeah, of course, of course. So so Man of Action, just in case people don't know, it's myself, Steven Siegel, Joe Casey, and Duncan Rouleau. And we all met way back in the day, mostly through the X office. I'm a New Yorker. Everybody else is from Los Angeles, kind of give or take. Some of them are transplants. But they all sort of were in circles together. They kind of knew of one another, but weren't necessarily hanging out with one another. And then Steve Siegel and I got the X books at the same time. So we met in that office. And actually, just before that, Duncan Rouleau and I worked on a Juggernaut one shot together and did not meet in person, but kind of struck up like a friendship over the phone. And once we started working together, Joe Casey got cable. So then he was in the X office. Duncan, we were constantly working with for art because Duncan's the only one of us who can draw and write. And we liked it, like we enjoyed working together, contemporaries all kind of coming up at the same time. So then when the time came to go do some work in another place, we decided to sort of migrate over to Superman, and we all kind of again migrated like one at a time. Um, I was over there. I sort of, Joe Casey came over, Steve came over, Duncan was doing art, so it just became a thing. We enjoyed working together and kind of cooked up like, well, if we like doing it sort of for other people, why not do it for ourselves? And what if we try to form a company? At the time, comic book creators, especially, not that it's much better, but were treated particularly poorly by Hollywood. And we all had, dreams of working in the industry in different ways. So we thought, oh, but if we have a company, people have to treat us better. Totally not true
It
at
didn't
all.
happen, huh?
Like the literal opposite. But but by being out there, by sort of hanging out a shingle, we did start to get work, and people came to us and sort of appreciated the fact that there were four different perspectives and four different people who would work on a given project, and uh, they were getting a bargain. They're getting four of us at the price of one. But it stuck, it stuck. And then we had a couple of lucky breaks sort of at the same time. The most important one really being Ben 10. Um, the guys over at Cartoon Network were looking to create something new, and they wanted to work with comic book creators to do so. And their kind of entry point into that world was somebody named Matt Senreich, who is part of the Robot Chicken crew. Yeah, co-created that with Seth, and he was like, "We don't do kids stuff, but I know people who do kids stuff." So he introduced us um, to Sam Register, who was a executive who ultimately we pitched Ben 10 to, and that became our sort of big break as Man of Action. And um, we chose really early to put the company name sort of ahead of our own names, um, because we thought it was the only way it was ever going to get any traction. And cut to almost quarter of a decade later, apparently it was the right call.
I would think so. I mean, let's talk about Ben 10 because I believe, was it three Emmys, if I read correctly?
You would honestly, you would know better than I would because I, uh, that's the sort of thing that, happens over the course of time, and often are not the categories that, I don't have an Emmy sitting in my house, so it's not it's not something I
Well,
could personally take
the
credit.
internet never lies, Joe, and it did say
Never.
the Emmy. Never, never lies. But I mean, congratulations. Can you kind of talk about how Ben 10 came about, like the creation of the character and everything that kind of went into it? It's very unique. Aliens, he's got his little hand thing that he could do, and he could, yeah, it's pretty cool.
Well, thanks. I mean, it really came from this initial meeting when we met this executive. uh he's a Hollywood guy, and here we were purporting to be a new company for Hollywood. And so we said, well, there are four of us, we'll pitch you 20 ideas in 20 minutes. And that sounded really good, and we did not have 20 ideas, so we had to cook them up. But since there were four of us, we each came up with an idea.
Yeah.
I was on the phone at the time because I was not out in LA, and the guys were in the room, and we literally had a timer. And if somebody's pitch went on longer than a minute, we would hit the buzzer and go on to the next one. And this guy Sam was very decisive and very clear on what he liked. So if he heard something he didn't like, I always remember this was one of mine where it's like werewolves and jet planes, and he was just like, nope. I was like, okay. um, that was it. Then it would be 3 seconds worth of speaking, and it was done. And one of those pitches was the idea for Ben 10, which started out as a kid who was able to sort of transpose himself with alternate universe versions that had powers. And even though it's almost impossible to believe now with so many multiverse stories, and uh, that have both been for grown-ups and for kids, that seemed like too heady a concept. But they very much like the idea of this kid with multiple power sets that would change and would evolve over time. So they went into development and eventually became Aliens after quite a long time. Um, and we cooked up the cast and the Omnitrix and all that good stuff. Uh, and then eventually, 2 years later ish, it kind of made its way up the chain and became Ben 10. And those original designs were all from Dave Johnson, who, fantastic artist and designer and etc. In his own right. So, he's a big part of that success.
So I have to know, right? If you said 20 pitches in 20 minutes, how many did you actually have? And were you getting close to whatever that was? You're like, what do we do if we get to like 13 and
No,
15?
we definitely had them. They were not
Oh,
all
okay.
good, like
Oh,
werewolves and
gotcha.
airplanes. But of those pitches, Generator Rex was another one, which became a show that we did on Cartoon Network. The show that ultimately became Zack Storm, which is a show that we did on Netflix, was also in there. And I think there was another one. It's escaping me at the moment, but there's of those 20, four of them, four or five have gone to series. So it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. But there's 15 more. We always tell anybody who wants to, just in case you want to buy werewolves with airplanes, it's there. It's ready.
Yeah. 15 minutes, 15 pitches.
That's
Anybody's
right.
listening, they're ready, right?
That's it. Then it's like Tarantino. Then I can retire. That's it. Those it.
Yeah, there's one YouTube one I think you did too, right? A YouTube title.
Well, currently we have Hello Neighbor.
Hello Neighbor, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, that's on YouTube, and that's its own really interesting. I mean, Man of Action, we create original stuff, but we also get hired
Yeah.
to do franchises, and sometimes it's redevelop them, sometimes it's just to sort of shepherd them. Obviously, we've done the shows at Marvel. We did Ultimate Spider-Man and Avengers Assemble, Sonic Prime on Netflix right now. It came out last year and finished up this year. Um, that first season, and then Hello Neighbor is another example. So yeah, we've gotten to play with a lot of really cool toys over the course of time, and you know uh, they come with different pros and cons. It's fun to create your own stuff, but there's nothing. You have to make it all from scratch. You don't know if it's going to work. And then you can come onto a legacy property, and that can be really exciting. It's awesome to contribute to, a long history of a project, but it comes with whatever baggage that project comes with. So,
You-
but we've been lucky enough to do both.
I mean, that's incredible. I mean, I don't know. I feel like a lot of people want to be where you're at right now when it comes to something like that. You actually did it, so that's pretty awesome. Can you talk a little bit about Big Hero? Big
Oh,
Heroes.
sure. I mean, Big Hero 6, the So Steve and Duncan were on Alpha Flight, the comic, and while they were writing and drawing Alpha Flight, they cooked up the team, Big Hero 6, and uh, built all those characters. And not exactly the way the characters are in the film, obviously,
Right.
but they cooked it up. And when it got turned into a film, it's one of those wonderful things where they dragged our names along, which has been fantastic. It's to have a Man of Action credit in a Disney film is pretty spectacular.
Yeah, I think Big Hero did okay in the
It did
box
okay.
office.
It
It
did
did.
okay.
I
And
got,
and
I
so
got my
many. Oh, there you go.
yeah. Now that's a
That's funny.
lot different from the comic version of Baymax, but
Oh yeah.
yeah,
But
but
it's
it's so
no,
cool.
it's wonderful, like seeing it and seeing how many, talented people brought it to life and took it to a place that is really special. I mean, it's a special movie. So I personally had nothing to do with any of it, so I can just say all my friends are awesome. So I'm very happy for the guys. But again, we put the name, we put Man of Action on there, which as opposed to Steve Duncan, which it certainly could have been. Um, and not everybody does it, but we feel like it's the way to sort of it helps us as a company, but it also reflects when we all work together. It's really hard to say, well, who did what, who made the thing special. If you got something 95% of the way there and somebody else did the last 5%, but it wouldn't have sold without that 5%, like how do you work that out, right? So uh, it's like I said, it's worked so far.
Yeah. Now, when you get that kind of a collaboration with the Disney, did you notice like things opened up even more for Man of Action, or have things just been fairly steady throughout the entire process?
Um, yeah, it definitely helps. I mean, it always helps when there's some sort of press release with the name and especially with something, successful or surprising. Um, so yeah, it's that's where our plan from 25 years ago actually came into fruition, where it's like, people know us as a company and they pick up the phone. What's also great is that because each of us still do comics or we do stuff on our own, all these streams of sort of our influence or our reach for the work we do all kind of feeds back to the company. So some people just know our animation work, and then other people know us as comic creators, and they go, "Oh, wait, you're also a Man of Action." It's fun how it works. It can be a little confusing for people sometimes, especially like if they've never met us and we're working with a new company. So we always have to kind of take them through a little training process of like, don't worry, not all four of us are going to sit in on every meeting. We're not all going to mess with your heads, that sort of stuff. But like I said, it's worked out so far.
Yeah, yeah. I think it has. Yeah, I definitely think it has. Can we talk a little bit about Sky and Luna? My understanding is that's kind of the next project. I don't know how much you could kind of speak to that, but how far along are you on that, and when will that be out in the open for everybody?
Yeah, that I mean, there's not a lot I can say about that. We're very excited about it. We're working with a lot of really cool people. Um, it's a it's an original project. I'm excited to see how it all comes along. I mean, it's real. I'm sorry to be vague about it, but it's
Oh
just
no, I understand.
yeah,
Yeah.
it is it's one of those things that I just can't talk about a lot, but it's
No, no,
we're excited.
fully understand. Yeah. I saw a little blurb and it kind of talked about a little bit of the storyline,
Mhm.
but it was vague. So I assume that there's probably just not a whole lot that you could speak about. But that will be kind of the next project that will be from Man of Action, right?
It's funny the timing on these things is so wonky that
Mhm.
I couldn't honestly tell you that that's the next thing because in theory that is the it's in the pipeline, but we're constantly working on a bunch of things at once. I mean, right now with again without being able to say exactly what we're doing, two video games. We have a couple of pilots that we're writing. Um, and then we have a couple of things in production that are already happening, like Hello Neighbor. So, at any given time, which one will actually sort of show up first, or which one will get delayed, or it's a little hard to say. Um, so I don't know that Skylin would be the next thing that would come out from Man of Action, but it's in the pipeline and it's in active production, which is always exciting. It's always cool when these things are moving and they're not just theoretical.
Yeah, yeah. Now you've written comics, you have creator owned comics, you've done a lot on the comic side of the business, and then you've been on this TV, Hollywood, movie, video game side. Is there one that you enjoy better than the other, or is it just like right brain, left brain? You enjoy both of them, but it's kind of exercising a different muscle that you just enjoy.
Yeah, they're just different. You know, I love telling stories. I get to do it in all these different mediums, and it's just fun. You know, it's like which one finds the sort of, I wouldn't even say the biggest audience. That's not really ever been my personal goal. It's more about finding the right audience. You know, like if 1,000 people find the weird little Fabergé egg you build, but it's right for them, that's really exciting to me. And you know, I've been lucky enough to kind of meet those people over the course of time that'll, you know, before when I Kill Giants was brand new, for example, and people would sort of come up and to a booth and we'd be at a convention talking, and all of a sudden everybody's crying because they're sharing this like deep, heartfelt stuff, reaction to the book and how it reflected their own lives. That was incredibly meaningful and continues to be, which is an amazing gift. And then obviously having a show like Ben, where it's like runs for 15 years, it's on in like every country on the planet, and kids are still being inspired by it today. That's very exciting, but in a very different way. So the, you know, the mass medium versus the comics versus the sort of, you know, more quiet, introspective sort of experience of a reader, you know, they're all exciting and different in their own ways for me.
Yeah.
Um, I also, I mean, there's plenty of like hills that haven't been conquered too. Like done some video game work that's been successful, and that's been really fun. I have not gotten to like cook up an original video game yet. Like that's something I'd love to do because I love games. Um, you know, there are plenty of comics that are still on the wish list that I would like to do, both for mainstream books and for my own. Um, and then yeah, I'd like to absolutely write features and uh, produce a show that's closer to sort of anime, because that's really what I love and um, consume probably most often. So yeah, there's still a lot of there's a lot of hills I'd like to climb. Mostly for creative reasons, though. Really, I mean, look, everybody wants to hit the jackpot. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
I would love to go like, ah, that's the one, and now I can retire and never have to worry and do whatever I want. But it's really more about what's
Yeah.
the best medium for the story. You know.
I'm just from what you said, I don't think you as a person that would probably retire and do nothing anyways,
Yeah.
right? There's like this creative side that has to be expressed, it seems like. Where do you get inspiration for some of the creations that you've come up with? Is there a certain thing that you always do? Are there certain people that you look up to? Or is there a certain genre that you really enjoy that inspires a lot of these ideas?
I mean, all of the above. You know, I mean, I tend to take a lot of stuff from real life and kind of filter it through all sorts of different lenses. Sometimes it's really just to the side of a one-to-one thing, like Immortal Sergeant, which is the most recent book I did through Image. That was very heavily inspired by events in my life, but it's not like a memoir. You know, it's, I mean, my dad was a cop. There, I grew up listening to cop stories. You know, it's all that's in there, um, including like very specific bits of dialogue that, you know, are actually from my life, like you know, direct lifts. But then there are stories that are still from real life, but are, you know, abstracted and whittled down to like what is really the theme and what do I really want to say about parenthood, or, you know, being afraid of death or whatever. And then that finds its own life. Um, and usually people become characters. I was actually just telling my wife yesterday that she's in, you know, something that happened between us has shown up in a project I'm currently working on, and you know, she likes and dislikes.
I was gonna say, what is her feeling about that? I mean, you two would be the only ones that probably would know that, whatever that is, right?
Yeah.
But I think when she sees that and everyone else is seeing it, I don't know. I'd be terrified of
Yeah.
my life if that happened to me.
She's not, well, it's very often for humor.
Yeah,
And she does appreciate that. but she knows. I mean, she also doesn't read my stuff, so it's really until she actually sits down and reads it, then but I fess up to it all the time.
Yeah.
Um, but she's generally okay with it. She's generally okay. But so yeah, I take stuff from real life. Then there are definitely, genres and creators that I'm very inspired by. Um, like I said, I love anime, and for me, that runs the gamut from, something like Jujutsu Kaisen, which is just so like visually stunning and crazy characters and deep power sets and all that stuff, to like I'm watching one right now called Apothecary Diaries, which is like a it's a shoujo, and it's about a young girl who solves like medical mysteries in the Emperor's Palace. It's like I love the art. I just love I love the aesthetic. I love the storytelling style. So, I try to bring some of that into the stuff I do. I like to cross pollinate too. So if we can take something like from, shonen manga, but bring that to American comics, what does that mean and how does that apply? And those are sort of fun, kind of like creative formulas to kind of, get my brain going.
Yeah.
Um, Definitely video games and video game storytelling, how do you cross pollinate that stuff? And then there's just so many, like the list is too long in terms of creative influences. Um, whether it's somebody like Naoki Urasawa, who's a manga, writer and artist, just great. Did Pluto and Monster, and he's incredible. Terry Gilliam was like he continues to be a huge influence for me for comedy and surrealism, and Robin Williams. It just goes on. So I'm very easily influenced creatively. Like I find somebody, and then I'm like shoot, and you sort of absorb them, and then try to delve into their work and see what you can, mine, not in the realm of like, oh, I'm trying to steal those jokes or I'm trying to do whatever, but to deconstruct it and then see if you can use those techniques, you know. Um, and there's been a lot of great stuff, over the last decade. I mean, we're just drowning in really, really cool visualists and cool directors and writers who are willing to take risks, and when their movies actually get to be released, which, doesn't always happen these days. And that's corporate nonsense that I
Yeah,
can't
yeah.
control. But
We'll stay out of that subject.
yeah, exactly. I'll leave
That's like
that
a
to people
podcast all
above my
by
pay grade.
itself. Yeah, we'll keep things positive, Joe.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
did notice, and I ordered it, and it hasn't come yet. I was hoping it would come by this time when I was interviewing you, but when you talk about manga and the influence that you have, now it's all making sense to me
Mm,
because I found, I don't know if you would call it an omnibus of Immortal Sergeant, but it's a thick and it's like
yeah, the
manga
trade.
size. And when
Yeah.
the only difference is you read it left to right, but if you read it right to left, I would have thought, man, this is a manga book, man. You know what I mean? Just from I
Yeah.
don't know if that was the influence that you were talking about as to why it was printed in that fashion.
Well, a little bit. Ken Nomura is half Japanese. He lives in Japan. When we first met and he agreed to draw I Kill Giants, he said I can do it, but I have to do it in a manga style because of time. And it basically it's a style that he can draw the fastest in. And luckily for me, it's also very cool and beautiful. And it certainly doesn't look like the really highly rendered kind of stuff that I think a lot of people think of when they first go, oh, manga. Like they think of really super detail like Toriyama or whoever. And that's not how Ken draws. But I love it. Like a good black and white story is nice, just something like, and he's so, even though his lines look loose, his design is super clean. So it's a really fluid style, and he's evolved obviously so much from when he did Eichel Giants to Immortal Sergeant. And then we just love that format. So, it's especially Sarge was always meant to be a graphic novel, but because of the way Image works, it's better to do sort of chapters and then put it together as a trade. It's kind of a safer bet for everybody too. Like you don't know if somebody's going to buy just a graphic novel, but if you put out chapters, at least there's word of mouth and it kind of helps. Um, so if we're going to do it in that format, then it's like, well, this is the version we love, and it just looks so good on a bookshelf. You
It
can't beat that.
does. I can't wait for it to come in. I saw it. I'm like, whoa, this is pretty cool. And then right away, I thought, man, this is like a manga feel. And now after talking to you, I'm like, okay, it makes a little more sense now.
Hmm.
Well, can we talk a little bit about your comic book career? Because as I was doing a little digging, um, it seemed like 1995, 1996 is the time frame when you kind of entered into comics,
Mhm.
and you did that through James Fielder, right?
Yep.
Can you kind of talk about that and that 6 month program that you were part of that kind of launched your comic book career, if I'm correct in saying that?
Yeah, yeah, 100%. No, that's totally accurate. So I was going to NYU for grad program, specifically in dramatic writing and learning to write screenplays. And James Felder and Mark Powers were editors at Marvel at the time, and they were looking to just sort of try to find new talent. They worked with a lot of talented people, but they felt like it was the same pool they were going back to all the time. So James had gone to NYU and reached out to our department to see if we would be interested in doing something like that. And I was working in the department as a graduate assistant to pay my way through school, which was a very, very, very lucky thing that I got to do. And I had had a conversation, multiple conversations actually, with this woman who was a secretary for our department. She's an older lady, and she knew I like comics because it came up one day, and she's like, "Oh, I learned how to read through Superman comics. I saw the pictures, and I wanted to know what they said and all that." So one day she says, "There's a letter sitting on our director's desk. It's probably going to go in the garbage. It has Spider-Man on it, so you may want to do something about that." So I stole the letter, and I read it, and it was James, reaching out about this thing. So I put the letter back, and then I sort of snuck in. I was like, "Hey, director of our program, I heard Marvel contacted you. What's that about?" Totally played dumb, and she checked it out and was like, "Oh, would you be interested in running this if we did it?" And I was like, "Oh, of course, so self-sacrificing me." But I was a comics fan, and I thought it would be really cool.
Yeah.
I never thought it would be anything more than a club, though. Like, even though it was being pitched as like, oh, maybe it'll be a way to get some folks into Marvel, I really thought it was just going to be a fun thing to do. And we got together, once every couple of weeks, I suppose, and we would have assignments. And it was actually really cool the way James and Mark structured the thing. It sort of went from, we started at dialogue and worked our way back to world building, which is probably backwards from how most people want to teach us stuff.
Mm,
And it was a really, I think, to their credit, it was a really smart way to do it, because it helped them figure out very, very quickly what people were good at.
mm,
And so in my case, they liked dialogue. They liked the dialogue I was doing. And when an opportunity came up where James needed somebody to pinch hit with some dialogue because the writer was a little bit overwhelmed, he offered me the opportunity to do that after a couple of months, and seeing that I was pretty consistent. And that was it. That was how I got in. And we ran that program. It was nicknamed the Stan Hatton Project. It was James's name. And that first year I got work, and another young woman who was an undergrad, she got work. And then the year after that, Brian Cavon, who was an undergrad at NYU while I was a grad, he went through the program and he got work. So we had a pretty good hit ratio for
I
the
think
couple of
so.
years we did it. And then I graduated. They didn't really continue the program officially as like a partnership with Marvel, but I wound up going back and teaching writing for comics a bunch of times. James actually now works at NYU, and is a basically runs our department. He's an administrator as well as a teacher, and so it's kind of nice, and it's all gone full circle. Like, James gave me my first work in comics, and I was able to give him like his first animation writing gig, and he's now done plenty of animation writing as well. So it's all in the family. Like, it's very cool. It's very cool.
Yeah, a little bit of a 30-year relationship built out of that, huh?
Yeah, big time, big
Yeah.
time. I'm actually going back to speak in April, I think, for like a program they're doing, just sort of to help the students know, like, there's all sorts of stuff you can do. It's not just TV, because the dramatic writing department does playwriting, TV writing, and film,
Okay.
but they're bringing in me and a novelist and a bunch of other people. So it's yeah, it really has been. I mean, I owe James, the beginning of my career, without a doubt. And and NYU
Yeah.
too, So it's been, yeah, it was a good time. And basically within a year, by the time we get to 97, I graduated my my grad program. I get my master's. That same summer I got married and started the X-Men. So that was like it was
Good year.
97 was it was a big summer. It was good.
That's awesome, man. Did you I mean you enjoyed comic books. You were a comic book fan. This opportunity came up. Did you think that this is going to be my career moving forward, comic books?
No, definitely not. It was very cool to be offered the opportunity to just get paid to write. I
Yeah.
mean that above all is like you go to school for this stuff, you pay, even though what I paid at NYU was a fraction of what people pay today. Um, you pay a lot of money to go to that place. And so to go like, oh wow, somebody's gonna pay me for the words that are gonna come out of my brain. It's pretty fantastic. Um, I really still thought I was gonna figure out a way to get into writing films. And I was sort of still on that track, but the problem was the very happy problem was that once you're like a warm body and you get your foot in the door at one of the big comic book companies, if you deliver on time and you deliver anything that's close to quality, people offer you more work. And so in a relatively short period of time, all of a sudden I was doing like 4 books a month.
Yeah.
And that was, for me, that's a lot of work. I know there are people that can do 8 and 10 books a month. I'm just not that guy.
Yeah.
Um,
James Tynan or something like that. It's like,
yeah,
how do you
exactly.
write
Like
so much? That's crazy.
yeah, I'm not that person. So I was doing so much that I was not writing like spec scripts and kind of keeping up my portfolio for movies. And I had a couple of like whiff ball opportunities because I just didn't have the scripts to back them up. Um, but that's okay. Like you live and you learn. And again, it all worked out okay. I mean, of the people, the graduate program was like 20 people, and I definitely was, one of a handful that right out of the gate made money writing. So, you can't say no to that. And it's been great. I mean, it's comics have done so much for me. I'm going to Turkey in a few weeks because of
Crazy.
comics, for a small convention that somebody's hosting out there. And I've been all over the world. I've met great friends. I've gotten to do so many things. So uh, but those things would not happen, I don't think, if I had only stuck to film. It would have been a very different life. And so far, it's been good. I got, all of my complaints are stupid complaints. So
I think it's the case for most of us,
yeah.
right? We can all complain, but a lot of times you're like, that's kind of silly, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, Joe, growing up as a comic book fan, was there a certain title that was your favorite? And then once you got into comic books, were you ever able to write for that title, whether it's DC, Marvel, or anything?
Sure. No, that's a great question. So when I was a kid, I had a box of comics that my uncle gave me, and they were everything. It was just sort of across the board. He mostly collected Superman, some war comics, and Spider-Man. So I always loved Spider-Man. It's like in my DNA. I feel like the first time I saw Spider-Man was like on the Electric Company. Like it's a long time ago. But the cartoons were there and all that stuff. And so I always loved Spidey. Superman, I read those books a million times, but I didn't totally take to it. He had horror books also. There's a lot of Witching Hour in there too, which I loved. Like I was obsessed with those. And so I had those books until I like had my own money, right? And then in junior high, that was when my friends who were older were like, "You should go buy comics." They're like, "Comics are cool." And I was like, "Yeah, sure." So we had a local store called the Incredible Pulp, which is no longer there.
That's a
But
cool name.
shout out to anybody who remembers the Incredible Pulp. And my first book that I bought for myself was New Mutants, and it was Sienkiewicz New Mutants. And that to me, that blew my mind because I was used to these comics that were from the late 70s. And then I'm looking at Sienkiewicz work and it's like, whoa, what is going on? Um, so I became definitely like a Marvel fixated Marvel zombie. It was just New Mutants, X-Men, Spider-Man. Like that was all I read. Um, pretty much until like I couldn't afford comics, like until comics, like because the prices started going up at that point. Um, and then in college was sort of when I got into DC because I had friends that were big DC heads and they had all these graphic novels and I would just borrow them and read that. So New Mutants, I wrote for the X-Men, but I didn't specifically ever get to do New Mutants. Spidey, I've been lucky enough to do, and that, that was a huge honor to just get to be part of that team and contribute, anything to that. And then Superman was, again, another kind of honor. It wasn't necessarily one that I was gunning for, but once I got that job and then got to be on that book for 3 years, that was very special to me as well. So yeah, I've the Spectre is one of the holy grails that's out there
Yeah.
because I had a bunch of Spectre books in that first pot, that first box, and I love the Spectre. I have an irrational love for the Spectre. Um, so that's one I wouldn't mind doing someday.
Yeah.
And I've never written Batman by himself. I've done JLA, but
JLA, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
but not Batman by himself. So, yeah, I think that's it.
Can you talk a little bit about Deadpool? Because you had a pretty like when I mentioned the name, I was at my comic book shop yesterday. It was Wednesday, so I'm picking up my pull list. And I mentioned to the owner, Ambrose, I said, "Hey, I get this opportunity to talk to Joe Kelly." And immediately, oh, Deadpool, yeah. I mean, so I don't know if that's annoying a lot of times that when someone mentions you, they automatically either go to Action Comics or they go to Deadpool because you've done so many different titles. But I have to think just from friends that I've talked to, Deadpool, like the character of a lot of things you developed, which is Deadpool today, that wasn't
Mhm.
Deadpool before you took over that title. So the impact that you had on that title is significant as a fan of Deadpool. I don't know if you feel the same way and if you're okay with that.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't. I'm definitely not somebody who likes to toot my own horn, but over the course of time, uh, I think that's just been borne out to be true. Obviously, the I built up from a platform that already existed because of Rob and Fabian and Mark and all the people that had done work before me. So I obviously did not create the character and you know um, inherited him uh, in a under conditions that were not honestly ideal. Like when Matt Idelson was the editor on that book, he was a brand new editor, and they were like, "Yeah, we want to try and do a Deadpool book. We don't really think it's going to last." I mean, literally, they were like, "Yeah, maybe we'll get 6 issues out of it." I don't think that was just Matt being defeatist. I mean, the way the publishing plans work sometimes is you just go like, "Oh, we'll try something. We have this budget, we got to spend it." And I pitched for the book, and I focused mostly on like the absurdity of it and some humor. And most of the pitches that he was getting were more Merc for hire, just like kind of middle, not middle of the road in terms of quality, but like the more expected, he's an anti-hero and he's going to shoot a bunch of stuff. So he took a chance on this crazy pitch, and it was at the time of Heroes Were Born. So like I don't know if you remember that, but the whole Marvel universe was compressed into this ball, and Franklin Richards had it, and Deadpool was going to steal the ball just because he was a dick and like he didn't know what he had, like he was just going to steal the kid's ball. Uh, he was going to fight Obnoxio the clown and Ego the Living Planet. Like it was all like, what weirdness can we do? Most of that wound up not getting done, but after I officially got the series and we kind of retooled it, and then it became the series that made it to the page. And I'm super proud of it. I mean, Deadpool is a cornerstone of my career, and um, I mean, I say it all the time because I mean, it just is. I mean, it was a book that came out. This is essentially pre-internet. I mean, not literally, but we used to do like chats on America Online.
Yeah,
Like that's
AOL,
that's what
yes.
happened.
I
And
just remember the dial-up and all the noise, but it took
yeah,
forever.
exactly. And the book, chugged along for a bunch of years and it got a lot of great press and we got to do a lot of really cool stuff. And obviously there's stuff in there, including the origin story, Blind Out, all the stuff that's migrated and made its way to the films. So yeah, I'm super proud of that. And then, the book was kind of like on the verge of being canceled, but like literal letters, handwritten snail mail letters would keep it from the brink. So it was like a cool time. I would have stayed on it, but the problem was that they kept telling us it was canceled, and then I'd start wrapping things up, and then they go, "Oh no, you got 2 more issues," and that literally happened like 2 or 3 times, and I was like, I don't know how to do this anymore. Like, so I think I'm done, and let's let somebody else do it. And then obviously it never went away,
Yeah.
which is great. So I I was the idiot who jumped off. Um, but it's probably okay. 3 years for me is pretty good.
Yeah.
Like that's about the longest that I've done a run on anything. That's a lot of stories. It's almost 40 stories, and I'm always impressed by people who have a really long, significant run on comics. And then forget about somebody like Oda with One Piece, where it's like 25 years and like a
Great.
weekly book. How do you? This is insanity.
Yeah.
Um, big respect for that. I don't
Huge.
understand. My brain just
Incredible.
doesn't work that way.
Oh, I
Yeah,
can't remember how many books are in this series. It's an astronomical
yeah.
number of titles that you have to collect if you want to try and collect them all.
Oh yeah, yeah. My
Insane.
son has gotten me into reading them,
Yeah.
and I read them through the Shonen Jump app because I think you need to have something like 500 or 600 volumes.
Yeah.
It's up to chapter whatever 1140 or something, which is incredible. And I would love to have that much passion for any one thing that you could do it for 25 years.
And I think $1 billion in sales worldwide too on
Oh,
all those titles. It's insane. How did you no, as an anime fan, just to kind of switch over, did you watch the Netflix series and what'd your thoughts about it?
Oh yeah, I really enjoyed it.
It was
As a
so
matter of
good.
fact, yeah, it really it surprised me, and in a good way. I was very pleasantly surprised. I was actually not of all the anime that I'm into. It's actually mostly modern stuff with a couple of exceptions. Like Cowboy Bebop or Evangelion. Like those are foundational for me. Fully Coolly, like, but I wasn't. I didn't like One Piece when it first came out because the age that I was when it actually hit the airwaves, it didn't really speak to me. I was like just kind of aging out of it. Um, so it just never clicked. So I'm actually completely in the dark. I'm like, I'm getting caught up because I'm like, oh, this live action thing was kind of cool. Like, what's the book? Oh my God, the books are amazing. Like the books are really, really good.
Yeah.
And it's been a joy to sort of read through them. So yeah, that as far as I'm concerned, the Netflix show did its job because it
Yeah.
made a new reader out of me. Um, so yeah, that was an all right one.
Yeah, no, that was my experience too. One of my favorite anime or manga books is Berserk. I love Guts.
Mhm.
I love again a lot of title. I think they're up to 19 volumes. So there's a lot I got to read, but the two movies and the series that have come out have been just excellent. But
Mhm.
I was new to that as well, and I just love the positivity of the story and the friendship that ended up building at the end of it. I then went back and started watching the animated series, which I think there's like 19 or 20 seasons of that
Yeah.
too. I was like, I don't know if I have the time to kind of get caught up. There's just way too much going on this
Yeah.
title, but really impressed by that. Really
Well,
impressed.
and that's why I'm reading it because
Yeah,
I definitely don't. I watch a lot of stuff, but I don't know that I could make the time
yeah.
to catch up with 1,000 episodes of a TV show. But I could read 1,000 issues of a manga. When you just said before that you were really taken by the positivity and the friendship, I thought you were talking about Berserk for a second,
Oh
and I
no,
was like, I feel
that's
like we've
completely
read different
opposite.
versions of Berserk.
That would be the opposite of
Yeah,
that.
exactly.
Yeah, you're like,
Uh,
this guy has not read Berserk at all. He has no
or
idea.
that, or we have a very different definition of
Yeah,
positive.
yeah, yeah. No, that is completely
No,
opposite.
no shade thrown on Berserk. It's just it's a different vibe. Very
A
different than
way
One Piece.
different vibe. Yeah. I mean, I personally, I really like it,
Hmm.
but it is not One Piece at all.
No. Yeah, and Berserk is another one that my nephews really love it. They're like, adults, young adults. And I started reading it. I'm not super far into it. It's one of those that like hasn't quite grabbed, and I like dark stuff. Like I have no qualms with dark. It just hasn't quite got me, that gripped me yet. But everyone's like, no, stay with it, stay with it. And then somebody went just sort of pulled down like one of the later volumes and showed it to me, and it's amazing to me how the art evolves over the course of time, which I didn't realize. So that's all very cool. So eventually I'll grit my teeth and I'll plunge back into Guts's world. But
Power through it, Joe. Power
yeah,
through it, my friend.
exactly.
You'll be rewarded, I promise.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, so then we get to a point in your career where you do make a switch to DC.
Mhm.
Um, I want to stay positive, but like from a cultural standpoint, can you kind of talk about the differences between Marvel and DC, and how enjoyable was it to get to that side of the universe, knowing that later on in life is when you were really exposed to DC in a big way through your friends reading their graphic novels and stuff?
Sure, yeah, and it's funny. Luckily all this stuff is like documented history, so I can be factual without it being positive or negative.
Yeah.
Marvel at the time, when we were there, they were literally filing for bankruptcy, right? Like they were in the midst of all this big corporate level shenanigans, and it put a lot of pressure on the people that we worked with, and so they had to make certain decisions, and a lot of those decisions were sort of a creative level of creative oversight that I was not comfortable with. So Steve and I were on the X-Men, and we got along well with the editorial team. But they would rewrite dialogue. We would beg them to let us do it. They needed to get something out the door. They wanted to make a decision. People had to make fast decisions, and a lot of times decisions were being made out of fear.
Mm.
So that got frustrating. And then after one or two sort of bigger events that we had done, where there was kind of a lot of headbutting and some changes at the very last minute for things that were like already drawn, we were like, this is not cool. We were basically then asked to just execute a storyline that they would come up with, and that's a perfectly fine way to work. There's nothing. That's how a lot of TV is done. Like people boil it in the room together, but ultimately you're handing it off to a writer. But it wasn't what we wanted to do, and it wasn't how we were hired. So after whatever 15 months or something on the X-Men, Steve and I both quit. I believe we were the first people to ever quit the X-Men, which may or may not have been a good thing. It was definitely scary.
Yeah.
And my daughter was 3 months away from being born.
Yeah.
And I had said to my wife, like, I just quit Marvel's #1 book. Like, I don't know if I'm supposed to stay. I don't know what to do. I kind of feel like I have to go do something else. And she gave me like the greatest gift that anybody could give, which was her support and her blessing for me to go do that. So then I left Marvel and wasn't quite sure what I was going to do. There was the beginning of some creator own kind of ideas in between, but basically then I was contacted by the Superman editor, and it was like by accident, actually, because he really preferred Steve's. He liked Uncanny X-Men more than he liked my X-Men, and he
Mhm.
thought I wrote Uncanny. But we did ultimately figure that out. He still hired me anyway.
Yeah.
And we all migrated over, like I said,
Yeah.
myself and Steve, eventually Joe Casey. But the move over to DC, the corporate cultures were really interesting because, bankruptcy aside, Marvel was really fun. Like it really felt like kind of what you always imagine, like the description in those old letters pages would be, where it was like there's the bullpen, and it just feels like there's a lot of energy there. And then the DC office was a lot more kind of like corporate, but it also felt very stable.
Mm.
Not like people were in suits and ties or anything like
Yeah.
that. It's still comic book people, so everybody was still like relaxed and fun. But it was just a different vibe. It
Yeah.
was a little quieter and a little bit more reserved, as opposed to this chaos at Marvel. Um, and I like them both for different ways, in different ways. But so I was offered the opportunity to work on Superman, and Eddie Berganza was the editor, and he was like, you know, if Superman gets a haircut, it winds up on the cover of Time magazine, so you can't do any of that Deadpool crap.
Yeah, yeah.
here. Like you have to take it seriously. And I was like, oh yeah, of course. Like that's the job, you know. You adapt your writing style for the
Yeah.
project. And that's the editor's job, is to protect the character. You know, it's funny. Everybody always just talks about IPs and stuff these days, but it's the character. That's what they're protecting, you know. And it was wonderful. Like it was cool. At first, Superman, all I really cared about Superman, even though I'd read some of those comics from back in the day, were the movies. You know, the Richard Donner movies were the Bible for me, as far as Superman goes. And that was how I approached him. But I was also, you know, newly married, and you know, had kid on the way. And so because there were multiple books happening at the same time, my book, the focus was, you know, sort of the man of in Superman, and looking at Lois and Clark as a couple, as a young couple. And that really, for me, was an easy way into the character, because I was one of those guys that was like, oh, Superman's overpowered. How do you write the fights? They're boring, all that kind of stuff. Uh, then over the course of time, after writing that character, I have a deep respect for that character. I love that character, really. And I think that Superman, you know, my 5 second soapbox. Superman as a character is really important, especially in the modern era, because to have a character that is not a cynic and
Mhm.
that sees the best in people and aspires to greater things is really important. Um, you know, I realize that our audience is not kids like it used to be,
Mhm.
and that predates me, right? I mean, that predates my beginning in comics. I know kids read comics, but it's certainly a, you know, a smaller fraction of the readership.
Yeah.
But even even to that degree, the idea that there's something naive or silly or stupid about that character, I think that's wrong. I think it's a false way to approach the character, and it's important to have somebody like that, you know. I think people need, you know, when when we go to be entertained, it's nice to have something a little hopeful in there. You know, it doesn't all have to be tower fantasy, and you know, oh, if something bad happened to me, I could be a super tough guy and all that stuff. We need to have both, and Superman very important in that role. So that was an incredible.
Now more than ever, too, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah, I would say so. So, you know, it was an incredible honor to get to do that, and I really enjoyed that run, and that was where I got to, you know, obviously work with more incredible people. I mean, Loeb was kind of, you know, the steering the ship, you know, to a large degree, and we became very good friends, and got to work with DeMatteis and Mark Schultz, and you know, it was just like a great group. Um, During that time. And, you know, DeMatteis wrote one of my favorite Spider-Man stories of all time, right? So it's like, you know, you're like, oh, I get to work with a guy who did Payments last on. Like, come on.
That's
Like,
all.
hell yeah. So it was a very good time.
Yeah. When you were talking about kind of the chaos that Marvel was going through at the time due to everything that was happening from a corporate standpoint, then going over to DC, which is a little bit more stable, did you notice that DC allowed kind of those creative juices to be more free, or because they were more stable in their characters, did it kind of stifle that? I don't know if
No,
that
only
makes
only
sense.
once or twice. It's funny, the how to phrase it. So like it was a little bit more of an institutional understanding that
Mm,
like you're going to hit a certain point where you can't rock the boat with a
yeah.
character like Superman.
Mhm.
And you know, they had survived actual living examples where this was a big deal. Like, you know, I don't know if you know this story, but like the Death of Superman comic came out at the same time that the Lois and Clark TV show was going to come out. And the Death of Superman comic blew the PR out of the water and took attention away from the TV show that they just spent a lot of money on. And people got in trouble for that. Like
Yeah.
people don't realize that, right? But and then obviously Death of Superman becomes this iconic year-long story. It was never meant to be that, you know, all this sort of stuff. But it created a system where Warner Brothers at large would say to DC, hey, X, Y, or Z is happening, so don't do anything. By the time Steve Siegel came over to Superman, we were literally getting told like, hey, there's a new movie coming out, so don't rock the boat. Like,
Mm,
don't draw any attention, which is not, it's not a great way to do stories, but it also, it felt like it was not personal. Like
yeah.
there was nothing personal about it. It was like, hey, look, this is how business is done when you're working on a character this at the time 65 years old, right? So so that was just what it was. And it's like, okay. But that being said, I've been really lucky that across my career, I've had exceptional editors, and um, that was very much the case at DC. Like the people I worked with at DC really understood story, understood what I was trying to do with the stories, and so we worked within those limitations, you know. And every once in a while, you know, I'd have some big crazy idea. I'd get really excited about like Zod is Superman's brother or something. And then, you know, Mike Carlin would take me to dinner and be like, so we're not doing Zod as Superman's brother. And I'd be like, okay, I tried, you know, I wanted to, I thought it'd be cool. And sometimes it was for like a really legitimate story purpose, like, you know, Last Son of Krypton is really important and we're trying to keep that integrity of that. And sometimes it would be something, just a difference of opinion. But everybody really, with very few exceptions in my career, I've been very lucky that the editors have always been supportive and clear and just done the job of trying to not only protect their characters but help me tell the story I'm trying to tell in the best way possible. So that was very much my experience at DC for the majority of the time I was there.
Now, with your experience at Marvel and DC, and then you move over to Man of Action, from a business standpoint, are there things that you were able to take away of watching how those two companies were run and that is being applied to Man of Action? Like, is there something like, wow, this is exactly what I would want to do if I had my own company, and here's what I would not want to do if I had my own company based on all those
I
experience?
mean, yeah, that's a great question. I would say not too many things specifically because comics, especially at that time, um, is just so different than the rest of the entertainment industry, right? It's you know, I unfortunately missed the time when comics sold, you know, 2 million issues a month, right? Like I wish I had been in that time.
Yeah.
I missed it by a couple of years.
Yeah.
So it's always been kind of its own like weird niche kind of special industry. And it predate, you know, my time there predates any of these sort of blockbuster, you know, the MCU or the sort of, you know, bigger DC movies. Um, so they were weird little cottage industries. It's kind of hard to sort of think of it that way, but that's the money was not there. It was there for merchandising and for keeping the books alive, but it just it wasn't like entertainment company the way we think of them now.
Yeah.
Now they're much more integrated to the bigger, you know, powers that be around them. Um, so on that level, there was not a ton that I would say like, oh yeah, we looked at this and we wanted to carry that forward. It's a lot more about, you know, you work in a structure for a long period of time and then you go, well, now I don't want to have structure, let me see what happens. And for me it was more messing around with different genres that I couldn't really experiment with, you know, on mainstream books. So I Kill Giants was, you know, one of the first things that I did at Image after leaving DC. um, the focus on creator owned books and what that would mean was, you know, was pretty big. But then with, I think with Man of Action, I mean, the, used to do these summits. You know, we'd get together and a bunch of writers and would talk about the directions of various books and franchises. And pre bankruptcy, Marvel, like they used to host a huge, like it was a big summit, like at a, it looked like the X-Men's mansion out on Long Island, and
Yeah.
you'd all go and hang out and eat and drink and talk stories. You know, it was really fun. Um, and so the experience of what that meant and breaking stories in a room together with people, that was something that we were able to then carry forward into other scenarios. Also, just comic book storytelling and understanding long story and how stories unfold over the course of this of a year of publication really helped for cartoons, you know, for any of the other kind of like seasonal storytelling that we're used to. So yeah, we picked up, you know, I would say we picked up a lot of technique. but not necessarily like business things.
Mm,
Not much deeper than like, well, dad did it this way, so I don't want to do it that way, you know.
yeah. Yeah.
I wouldn't say much more than that.
Man, that's awesome. So let's get into a little bit of the creator owned. You've had some great successes with creator owned. Um, I want to be careful because I'm sure you're working on some stuff, but I don't know if there's anything that you could kind of share of what you're working on, or are you working on stuff that's creator owned that we could see in the next few months?
Nothing that's going to pop up in the next couple of months.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, Ken and I, so Ken Demore and I waited way too long between I Kill Giants and Immortal Sergeant to work together. We did a couple of small things together. Um, some stuff that was published in America. One thing in particular that was very cool that was published in Japan. We did a blackjack story together for a Tetsuka magazine, which was like super cool to me.
That's awesome.
Um, Nobody's ever gotten to read it in English, but they're trying to reprint it. But so Ken and I are definitely going to do the next book much sooner than later. That is cooking, just sort of bubbling in my brain. Um, there's another project I've wanted to do for a long time that an artist is working on, or wants to start working on. So I'm hoping to get him stuff on that relatively soon. But yeah, I have a feeling that barring a sudden lightning bolt of like, oh, I want to do more short, like chapters,
Yeah.
um, that would come out super fast. It'll probably be a little bit of time
Yeah.
before there's a thing. Because I like to know the whole story.
Mm,
Like there are some projects that I would like to go back to. Like I never finished Four Eyes.
yeah.
Bad Dog is very close to my heart. I would love to go back to that. Four Eyes actually do know the ending. That's now more of a scheduling issue for me and Max. But Bad Dog was meant to just kind of be like, oh, I love Deadpool and I want to get back to raunchy humor, so I'll do Bad Dog. And then it was a little open ended on my side, and so I sort of dropped the ball for Diego, and he's always been very generous and said he would go back to it, which I appreciate. Um, but I would love to do more Bad Dog eventually, but not knowing where the story was going, you have an idea, you kind of bang out a story, and then I go like, oh, well, wait, now I'm on the edge of the cliff and I didn't build a bridge. I don't know what comes next. I don't like that feeling.
Yeah.
So I like to try to plan out like, oh, here's a year. This is what a year looks like if I'm on an ongoing book, or if it's a limited series or something, I just know the whole thing before I write issue one. That's my preferred way to do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, so creator on stuff's going to be a little while. I do have the Deadpool Wolverine book coming out at Marvel. That's been super fun. Adam Kubert and I haven't gotten to work together since the X-Men days.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So, and he's a great guy, like I get along great with Adam. So that book is, I mean, it's gorgeous. Like he's killing it. And it's really fun. And so that'll be out this year. But yeah, creator stuff, it'll be a little bit of time, but more is definitely coming. More is
Yeah.
definitely
Wow, Joe. I mean, what an amazing career that you've had. Are we missing anything that we didn't cover?
coming. I don't think so. I
Yeah.
mean, it's no, I've just been lucky. I mean, it's been a good I feel like I'm talking about like it's over. It's been a good run. But it's been a good run.
Yeah.
And I've been very lucky. I've worked with great people. I've gotten to have amazing opportunities. Proud of the work that's out there, and looking forward to doing more for as long as possible. I mean, like you said, if $10 million dropped out of the sky tomorrow, I would work differently,
Yeah.
but I wouldn't retire. Like I think I still have plenty of stories to tell.
Yeah.
Um, I'm excited to tell them. I'm excited to sort of see what the next medium, that will be sort of fun to mess around in will be. Video games being one that I really, I mean, I play games and both sort of actiony, silly games and big long narrative games. Like right now, I'm toggling between Baldur's Gate and Helldivers, right? So it's like one is just like shooting things for democracy, and the other one is like really in-depth D&D storytelling with beautiful characters.
Yeah.
I love both of them equally. I just go back and forth. Um, But so I'm excited to just sort of explore, and I do still, I've directed a couple of short films. That's still writing and directing a feature is still like a huge, like that's probably the biggest brass ring that's out there that I still want to grab. Um, Getting to do I Kill Giants was amazing. Getting to translate that and adapt that work. Um, Also adapting Action 775 into animated movie. That was great too. So more of that
Yeah.
I would love to do. So no, I'm a lucky guy, and as long as people keep asking me to show up, I'll keep showing up. And I'll probably keep showing up even if they don't ask me, and then we'll deal with the fallout.
Well, I could tell you, Joe, I'm a huge fan of your work. As a comic book fan, I'm almost 50. I've read quite a few comic books, and what you have done on the Marvel side and the DC side, specifically Deadpool and Action, which I still remember quite a bit of that, has been a huge part of why I love comic books. So thank you for everything that you've done. And man, it's such an
Thank you.
honor to meet you. I'm hoping we could do this again when we have more news, maybe later on in the year, the beginning of next year. I'm sure you're going to drop all kinds of really amazing stuff, and we'd love to have you back on to talk about it. But
Oh, thank you.
yeah, really appreciate you spending some time with me today. And man, I wish you nothing but the best.
Oh, thank you. It's totally my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on, and for reaching out and for saying such nice things. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, yeah. No, I appreciate it, Joe. Thanks again, man, and have a great weekend coming up.
Thank you very much. Thank you. You too.